Quick hello and welcome back to the Future Edit. I am your host, Kelly Eckhart, and today I am super excited about this conversation and my guest today. I have Kirsty. She is a functional medicine health coach. And for you women out there that have been super confused about PMS, your monthly cycle, hormones, we're going to talk about that today because it is super, super important as women, one, to be empowered by our hormones, and two, to understand how our body works. So, Kirsty, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to have you introduce yourself and kind of give a bit of your background, and then we'll talk about your work.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you so much for bringing this conversation to your audience. Like, it's one that we all should have had much sooner in life, I feel. So I'm always passionate and love chatting about this. So a bit about me. I'm, as you mentioned, functional medicine health coach, and I specifically work with menstruators who are ready to ditch PMS for good and just help people have more energy and to feel more vibrant. And it wasn't always that way for me. I came into this whole profession because of my own hormonal struggles. When I was 27, had really terrible adult acne after kind of going through my teenage years with no acne whatsoever. And then just thinking, why is this happening to me now? So I kind of went through a bit of a journey. And this all sort of happened whilst I was living in Australia. I was living in Sydney for like 3.5 years. And there's just a beautiful community there of like holistic practitioners and people that are very focused on healing yourself naturally, understanding what's going on internally, what's the root cause of this acne, this hormonal imbalance that you've had. So that's kind of where I was introduced to this work of functional medicine. And once I went through my own journey of healing myself naturally, and then just naturally, as us women do, we talk about things and what helped us, and we speak to our friends and anybody that would listen about our journey. And it made me realize that a lot of women menstruators are struggling with similar sort of issues. Mine manifested as adult acne. Others can manifest in many, many different ways, and lots of those things we can touch on today. So that's kind of a bit of a background of me and how I got into it and why I'm so super passionate about hormone health in general.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm back in the UK. I live in Bath. It's a really beautiful, historic city. Big, passionate lover of the outdoors and love spending time with my little dog, which again, he's great for my hormone health as well.
I have 2 cats, so that it's the same.
Animals are the ones. Yeah, they really are.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I think they know when you're feeling a bit off because they just come and they kind of want to comfort you. And it's like, oh, thank you.
100% do. Yeah.
So let's talk about your work. What is a functional medicine health coach, and how do you help women break the myth of having bad periods and having PMS?
Yeah, so functional medicine in general is kind of looking at the person as a whole. So instead of, typically when we go to our doctors, if we're just going to conventional doctor, you go with a symptom and you typically come away with something to treat that symptom, like normally medication. And oftentimes when it comes to hormone health, so say you went to your doctor, like I did with my acne, it was like, okay, well, you're already on hormonal birth control. Let's just like switch you around. And that's often the case when we go to the doctor with something hormonal. It's very, very common, unfortunately, that you'll come away with either a suggestion of hormonal birth control or, you've agreed to go on to it. And it's very common. So if anybody's there relating to that, it's very common for menstruators to walk away with the hormonal birth control. So anyway, so that was a bit of a side note. So functional medicine looks at the person as a whole instead of focusing on the symptom.
Okay.
So it kind of looks at, okay, what are all the factors that contribute to what's potentially going on? So it's like the foundations of health, what's going on for you. So in my work in particular, there's lots of different routes you could go down with functional health, but because I'm so passionate about hormones and hormone health, that's kind of where I've specialized. And it's basically the work that I do is help my clients firstly understand their bodies. What are all these hormones? What are they doing? And why are they like working against me right now? Why are we not like working together?
Yeah.
And then they can kind of make sense of why they may be having certain symptoms. And also spending a lot of time to basically reconnect with our hormones to kind of understand. It really helps us understand our energy levels, our motivation, our productivity, our zest for life at certain stages, so really helping them get that reconnection back to themselves.
Yeah.
And then we talk about, okay, what are the foundations of health that feed into balanced hormones? So, we look at nutrition and hydration, movement, stress management, and within stress management, that whole idea of connection and play, what we can do around that piece. And then we have sleep. How are you sleeping? What's your sleep hygiene like? And then a massive piece that I've personally found that's been missing in this topic is environmental toxins. So the things that we have in our homes that we come into contact with daily that actually do have an effect on our hormones. So doing a lot of that work as well. So that's basically what I help my clients with. And at the moment I do that one-on-one.
Okay.
And I'm also launching a group coaching program. So then I can just do this work with more people. I can get more impact out there.
Oh, that's brilliant that you're going to launch that, because like we were just chatting before we started recording, women and myself, we haven't been taught to be in tune with our hormones. A lot of times you get told that you're going to get your period and then you're shown how to kind of deal with it. And that's it. And then it's like, oh, you're going to feel tired and you're not, you're going to be in a bad mood. You can have this and this and this, but there is no, actually, you don't have to suffer every month, which most of us women do suffer each month, don't we?
Yeah.
So tell us the importance of hormones. One, most people know what hormones do, but why are they so important for a woman?
Yeah. So our sex hormones it's not just about reproduction. Like sometimes we look at it just in isolation. And this is the beautiful thing about our amazing bodies. No part of the body ever works in isolation. It's just like beavering away on its own stuff.
Yeah.
Everything is like this beautiful orchestra that's kind of humming along and working together. So like, obviously our hormones dictate our cycle. And a cycle, it culminates in the bleed, the period, the movement of blood, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah.
But also there's the really important element of ovulation. And we can definitely touch on that a little bit more of the importance of ovulation.
Great.
But just in general around hormones and the amazing things that they do, they help regulate our immune system. And everybody's like focusing on immune health at the minute with everything that's kind of going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
World. So if your hormones are off, the immune system is off. It supports things like our heart health. It supports our breast and bone health. So hormone balance and really working with our hormones is really super important for us women menstruators, for like osteoporosis, for instance, all of that kind of stuff. It helps with the nervous system. So, when hormones are balanced, we feel more calm, we're more in tune with our mood and what's going on. And our hormones have this like amazing anti-inflammatory effect as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of hormonal issues can be caused by inflammation, which indicates that there's an imbalance with the hormones.
Okay.
And another amazing one is our hormones dictate our brain function and what's going on there. And our brain function across our cycle will change about, I think there's studies that say like 15 to 20% our brain function will change over our cycle. So when I was hearing all this stuff, I was like, this helps us make so much sense of why there are days when we just do not want to get out of bed. And there's nothing wrong with us. We're not crazy. We're not lazy, which a lot of my clients beat themselves up so much about, well, I feel so lazy because I just want to rest today. And I'm like, this is your hormones. They're telling you to do this because your hormone levels are really low right now, naturally.
Yeah.
So this work around connecting with your hormones and understanding what they do is almost like our permission slip to slow down when we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a shame that we need a permission slip to slow down. But like you say, I mean, it's unfortunate and fortunate that our bodies, you know, we need to be in tune with our bodies, because that is us, like you said, telling us, okay, I can't do it today. It's enough. So once you know your cycle, you can start planning your work week. You can plan everything around it. So, you know, okay, oh, on this day I'm going to start. So I'm probably, you know, I'm going to be feeling a little bit sluggish, or I might have some cramps this day. So let's not have our social day on that day, you know, 100%. Stay in bed. It's okay. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the important piece of work where I kind of start with my clients is, yeah, how can you use this? It's your unique inner rhythm. It's really unique. Yeah, there are typical ranges for a cycle, but what happens in your cycle month to month is so unique to you. You've got this inner wisdom within inside of you that when you tune into it and work with it and use it as like your, you know, if you're like, I love to write a to-do list in my paper diary every day. So when I'm writing that down, I'm like, right, everything that I want to achieve or what I have on for the day, I check in with like where I'm at with my cycle. And I'm like, is this in alignment with where my hormones are at? When I try and push too much as I'm leading in towards my bleed, I'm like, this is just going to cause more friction and I'm going to get burnt out quickly. Is there a way that I can move this just by a week or so when my hormone levels are naturally rising again, that this stuff is going to feel way more effortless for me? Yeah. So it does really become your productivity tool, your training tool. If you're, you know, if there's a particular thing that you're training for, like for movement in particular, or even just training goals, you know, if like a goal is your, you know, there's weight loss or something like that, using your cycle as well is so beneficial to all different goals that we have in our life in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about getting to know your cycle. How does one do this? And we can spin off of that as well. Like, for instance, I knew my cycle for a long time because I tracked it and then switched birth controls, and now I don't have a period anymore. How does one keep up with all this when they don't even usually have the symptoms anymore of when your period is going to come? So let's first talk about the importance of knowing your cycle and how one can start to track it.
Yeah. So I love that we're having this conversation around the importance of tracking, because I remember when I started tracking my period, it was literally just for me to know when my period was going to start. That's all I thought that this tracking thing was for.
Yeah.
And then what I've learned as I've gone into the more functional medicine side of it, I'm like, well, actually, when used correctly, this is something that you can use as one, a natural contraceptive, whether you're trying to get pregnant, whether you're trying to avoid pregnancy, but also regardless of, you know, if you're trying to fall pregnant or not, tracking your cycle. So it's not just the period, it's the whole cycle. So the period and the ovulation is your indicator of your health. How is your health at this moment in time? And it's what they've actually, I think it was like 2017, like a gynecological college in America actually defined our cycle as our fifth vital sign. So, you know, if you go to the doctor and you get your blood pressure checked and your heart rate and all those things and your respiratory rate, they check those things to make sure you're okay. That's why your doctor always asks you, like, when was your last period? Because it is our vital sign. But it's, again, like I've said, it's not just the period. The ovulation is the really important part as well, because when we are ovulating, we're having the estrogen in the first half of our cycle, which is that like get shit done hormone. Yeah. And then progesterone is the second half of our cycle, which is like your cool, calm, and, you know, chill hormone. So, you know, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety in that second phase, that's a good indicator that there is an imbalance as well. Yeah, tracking the whole cycle is really your indication of what's going on for me, and this is a really important thing as well, is that what's your normal? It's like, find your baseline. And then when things change from month to month, keep a note of that, whether you do it in your paper diary, whether you're doing it using an app. And there are so many amazing apps that you can use to track your cycle. And the more information you give these apps, the cleverer they get for you. So knowing your normal, and then when things change, you're like, oh, okay, that's been happening for a few months. You know, if you say, for instance, you've been getting more pain or heavier bleeding, and you're like, that's not normal for me. Maybe there's something, you know, it's basically like a signal from your body saying, okay, something's off balance on the inside. You know, we don't have the benefit of being able to check in and see what's happening inside there. So the hormonal symptoms are like, it's almost like a little text message from your inside to go, okay, something's a little bit off, like, and whatever you were doing a few months previously has kind of thrown the hormones off balance.
Okay.
So knowing that if we had to say the biggest reason for tracking your cycle, it's to know your normal. And I would say, like, before I used to track, I always used to think, oh, I'll remember when my period was. And I just remember I was thinking, oh my God, it's only happened like a week ago. Why is it happening again now? Like, we love to think that we can remember these things, but life is so full, isn't it? Like, we can't be expected to remember those dates. So even just for that as well, it kind of helps us. And again, like, if you feel really low one day and you're like, oh, okay, if I could just open this app and something goes, okay, you're like 7 days out of your period, and you're like, that makes so much sense now. I'm actually not a crazy person. It's because my hormones have changed. So
And you were saying earlier the importance of ovulation. Do you want to go a bit deeper into that and the aspect of that during your cycle?
Yeah. So typically, you know, what they always use as like an average cycle length is like the 28-day cycle.
Yeah.
But if you're sat here listening thinking, oh my God, mine's 32 or mine's 26, like, that's just the average, and they use it because it's a nice round number. Only about 13% of the population actually have that typical cycle. So what typically happens is, so say for instance you're new to tracking, what you would track, day one of your cycle starts on the first proper day that you bleed. So if you have a few days of spotting, which is kind of like giving you a bit of an indication that something's about to happen, it's like your little warning signal. The day one is your first proper bleed. So start tracking from that day. And then roughly halfway through your cycle, that's when ovulation will happen. So that's when the egg is being released, you know, in the hope to be fertilized. And that's the window, that's your fertile window. So the egg can only kind of be fertilized for 2 days. If it was just down to the egg, it would be 2 days, but sperm can live inside of us because of the mucus that happens around ovulation for 6 days. So that's why your fertile windows, you can only really get pregnant within this 6-day window. That blew my mind when I heard this. I was like, I thought I could get pregnant all the time. So like, just having that is a great indicator and another sort of step if you were wanting to use, natural birth control. But again, what happens with ovulation is then, you know, there's the amazing release of different hormones. So when we're not having an ovulation, and whether that's because we're taking hormonal birth control, or, you know, sometimes really stressful situations can actually stop the release of an egg. And that's how big stress can be on our hormones. You're not going to get the release of all these amazing hormones that keep us kind of calm. Progesterone in particular, so the one that I've talked about, the benefits for osteoporosis, for instance, and ovulation, the amount, I've just recently been reading about this, the amount of times that we ovulate in our premenstrual time has a really big impact on how we're going to experience perimenopause and menopause. And a lot of that does come down to like the progesterone and things like that. So that's just a few reasons that ovulation is really important. And then just touching on your point of what happens when you are taking hormonal birth control, what kind of happens with your cycle. there's an ebb and a flow of your hormones when you're not on any hormonal birth control. You have estrogen sort of peaks at the middle with testosterone to make ovulation happen. So that's why you kind of, in the first half of your cycle, you're really in that kind of like go get sort of mentality, really social, really kind of energetic. And then after ovulation, so halfway through, that's when your hormones start to drop. Estrogen in particular starts to drop, progesterone then picks up. And this is where the issues happen if there's a hormonal imbalance.
Okay.
So that's what would happen if you weren't on hormonal birth control. So you have these ebbs and flows. With hormonal birth control, because typically, depending on what type that you're on, it'll be a synthetic form of estrogen and progesterone. Some of them are just progesterone. You will literally just flatline the whole way through.
Yeah.
And for some menstruators, that's the reason that they go on it, because their emotions are so out of control. Having that flat line actually is like, that's actually what I need right now. I need to just have that balance.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that a lot of, and this is a word that I used myself when I was on hormonal birth control, was just feeling a bit numb, that I didn't feel the highs, which meant I didn't feel the lows. So, nobody's like really angry about not feeling the lows, but you don't feel the highs. So I just generally, the word I used to describe myself on hormonal birth control was just a little bit numb. But again, and there's absolutely no judgment here with the choice of, if you're on hormonal birth control for any reason. I was on it myself for almost 12 years, but I feel that sometimes we don't always know how it affects us.
Yeah.
And actually, the way that hormonal birth control works is that it switches off the communication between our brain and our ovaries to essentially stop ovulation.
Yeah.
So again, that's why it can have quite an impact on the way we feel, on our emotions.
Interesting.
So with that, then tuning into our cyclical nature is really important for us as womanhood, because we were always designed to be cyclical. Now, if you're on hormonal birth control, or if you're heading in towards perimenopause, menopause, you can still tap into a cyclical nature. And this is where I help a lot of my clients who are on hormonal birth control start to tap into a cyclical nature. And that comes down to using the cycles of the moon. So the moon has a 29.5 days kind of like rotation. So how amazingly similar is that to, menstruation and that sort of cycle that we have there. So if you aren't currently able to track your cycle naturally, definitely tune in to the cycles of the moon and how that operates.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because it's a new moon tomorrow as well, in Aquarius. And I always find it quite interesting because I'm in a position now that I need to sit down and learn how my cycle goes with the moon now, because beforehand I had such heavy periods. I knew exactly when it was going to start and when I was feeling. But now that I got a new IUD and she decided, because I didn't have any hormones, because I couldn't have hormones. And now she's like, well, you're getting a bit older, so I think you need a little bit more. And then it just shuts everything down. You're like, but now how do I track this? How do I know how I'm going to feel every month, which I find very interesting. And so with the moon, then do you find that women usually start their period on a new moon, or is that usually how it starts?
Yeah, so that's how it correlates. So I love to talk about the phases that happen in your cycle. So
yes, that's a good one.
Yeah. And if you could see this graph that I'm doing with my fingers, naturally our hormones fluctuate in such a way, and there are 5 key hormones and they fluctuate in 4 distinct phases. Again, how beautifully does that correlate with the moon?
Yeah.
So the first season, and I like to talk about it in like the seasons, like we experience them. So like winter, summer, like winter, spring, summer, autumn.
Yeah.
I find we can actually connect with that and how we typically feel in those seasons as well. So it's a nice, easy reminder of how we actually feel in each of those phases. So day 1 of your bleed, so that's the the first day that you're tracking from, that's what I'd call inner winter. We're feeling, it's a little bit dark. We want to like hunker down. We just, it's the day we want to maybe spend some time on the sofa eating like heartier meals. That correlates with the time of the new moon. So you just mentioning that, the time that we're recording this is the new moon. So this is a perfect time. It's a new cycle. This is, it's a fresh start. And that sometimes we really feel that during our menstruation, we're like, oh, we feel a little bit low, a bit heavy. We often feel like there's not things that we can do to be like productive, but there are. Like, if you're an intuitive person as well, this is where a lot of people start to feel quite strong intuition, because it's the time that we go inwards. It's a time for reflection. It's a time of, what served me in my last cycle? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? It's, again, like, if you think about what's happening biologically, there's release of old stuff that's no longer serving us. So it's that kind of time. Okay, what can I release here? So if you're a fan of like rituals and different things, this is a really nice time that you could create something around that as well. And then we have the next phase. So once your period has stopped, you come towards that spring phase. So, things are getting a little bit brighter. Our energy is starting to rise, because naturally the hormones, this is the period where the hormones would naturally be starting to rise. And this correlates with the waxing moon. So again, if you're not able to tune into, the end of your actual cycle, then, look at when that waxing moon, what the day is. How beautiful is it as well? You can look at the sky.
Exactly.
See that as your indicator as well. And then out of the springtime, so like, that's a really beautiful time to start, planning things, what's coming up. You can start to feel that, the brain is starting to fire on all cylinders. We're coming out of hibernation, starting to feel a little bit more social. And then that leads into the time of summer. So summer is the time that we would be ovulating. And summer is like a really short period. And that, being from the UK, that I definitely feel that summer only happens for like 2 days here. So I can really relate to that. And it's like, we want to like hold on to it for like dear life, because we feel so amazing in this time. Like, this is the time that all of those hormones kind of peak. Libido is naturally high. We feel so confident in ourselves. This is the time to be like making new connections, trying new things, all of that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And this is the time with the full moon. So it correlates to like, we can feel so much around the time of the full moon, can't we?
Yeah.
So this is where like that ovulation sort of phase comes into it as well. And then once we've kind of, we still kind of live the highs of summer for a little while as we like head into the autumn season, because the hormones drop slightly, but then they do kind of have a peak. So you do stay in that summer high as you kind of like transition into autumn. And like, again, like the seasons make so much sense, because summer can like drag into September. Even sometimes you get those glimpses in October and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yes.
And then it gets really dark and cold. And that's kind of when you're in the depths of autumn. And this is the time that I find most menstruators really struggle with. This time can feel really long. And when you see your cycle, typically like this period can feel quite long. And, if you're struggling with hormonal imbalances, this is normally where they show up. So problems with mood, problems with energy, pain, and if you suffer, really bad with emotions around this time as well, it can go on for 10 to 14 days. So it can really impact a lot of people with this. And that's the time of the waning moon. And then it comes full circle and we kind of start over. But the autumn phase, similar to when we go into menstruation, this is a really good time to almost like get really critical with ourselves, to do a lot of analysis on ourselves, because I often think about it like there's this voice in my head and she gets really loud in autumn and she's like, you're not good enough, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. But it's like, how could we use that voice to our advantage? So journaling, again, like, okay, what served me, how can, what improvements are there? So this is another time for really great self-reflection, almost like using that mean girl to your advantage in this time as much as possible, and trying to like quieten her down a little bit by like paying attention to her. But that's the beautiful thing, and that's why I love to encourage anybody that's listening here that hasn't ever tracked their cycle. Like, this is new information, that there never really is. It's never too late.
Exactly.
You start at any moment. And I urge you to do that. Like, I started really late into my 20s. And even when I started, I wasn't using it to its full potential. I feel like the more and more I use it, the more I add into it, the more in depth it becomes, and it weaves its way into your life as well. So yeah, just start and see how it feels, and see where the pennies start to drop, because that's definitely where I think it just helps people make sense of a lot of things. And especially when you can start to see maybe some like correlations of things that have maybe happened a few months in a row, and you're like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense. So yeah,
it's so interesting. I mean, I just started tracking my period when I turned, I think I was like 39 or 40, and I was quite shocked with myself. And I mean, I used to, and then I stopped, and then all of a sudden I was like, man, I just feel like I'm off. I don't feel right. So I started again, and it's unbelievable. As soon as I kind of put it out there on Instagram, like, I'm just about to start, tracking. I can't believe the amount of messages from women in their 40s going, how have I never done this before? And you also come to this point in your life as well. I know for me, I'm shifting a bit of, you want to know yourself so well. You want to figure everything out. You want to be that strong woman. So this is a really good starting point, which I think should be taught in schools with girls from a very young age. Me having a daughter that's going to be 10, I'm thinking, how do I educate her about this to not be embarrassed of her cycle, to really just own it and dive deep? Because then when they get into teenage years, it's just so much easier, isn't it? To already know yourself a bit more, because it's a confusing time anyways during that age period.
And that's the thing. It's like, we have education on it, but it's so like dry biology. I hated biology. I was like, I just wasn't interested. There was nothing empowering about some of my friends, by the time we were even having those conversations, had started their period. So imagine like being one of the first in your like group to start, and then it was so like, oh, we have to like hide a tampon up our sleeve, or have to like stuff our like pads up our sleeve because it's so embarrassing. I used to do that when I was working in an office. Still, now if I worked in an office, I'm just like, I will happily talk to anybody about it, male colleagues, and the more the people around us get on board with what's happening as well. And exactly what you were saying, like with your daughter, like, for you to be the example to her about, this is how we talk about our periods. And if you need anything around your period, you tell me, and we talk openly about it. And something to bear in mind, if anybody else listening does have daughters that are going to be going through that period, is to know that when we first get our period, our hormones are so all over the place, because this is all new to us. We're all developing. So obviously, those mood swings that we know are so normal, and it can take a while for things to peter out, and for your daughters, teenage girls, to actually get what we would call like a normal period. So you almost, again, want to encourage them to start thinking about, okay, start to track your cycle, start to see what's changing from month to month. Because often what I hear from a lot of my clients who have younger daughters, teenage daughters, is that they go to the doctor quite early on if there's like, maybe they're struggling with really bad pain, maybe they're struggling with heavy flow. And what typically happens at that point is, like what we were saying earlier, they'll get put on hormonal birth control, and they're still very young. Their body hasn't had the time to go, I'm really just trying to figure this out for myself. And I do understand the logic for it. Like if it's debilitating and it's stopping you going to school and all of those kinds of things, I do appreciate that. But there are things that we can do naturally.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the mentality. You know, try different lifestyle changes first, see how that goes over a period of months. And then if that really isn't making any difference, then consult with the doctor and see what options there are. I wish there were more options than just take this hormonal birth control.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we can approach our periods and PMS from a lifestyle change, natural options, because you're really big on that. So talk us through what we can do to help ourselves and help our cycles.
Yeah. And this is applicable to wherever you are. So if you are taking, and this is kind of like how I went about it, I kind of did these changes while I was still on hormonal birth control. Kind of, there's no reason that you can't put these foundations into place. And it's actually going to help you if you do choose to come off hormonal birth control. So this is something that's applicable to everybody. And it's really looking at those foundations of health that we talked about, that we touched on earlier. Yeah. You know, nutrition, just some things, you know, what am I eating every day? Is it providing me enough of the key nutrients that my hormones need to grow and develop and flourish? Am I actually eating, like, and this is huge for women and menstruators in general, eating enough protein? If I could just ask you to look at one thing this week, is like, are you eating enough protein at breakfast? Typically we don't, because like if you grew up like I did, we'd have cereal for breakfast, you'd have a piece of toast. It's missing protein, and protein is really key to balancing our blood sugar levels. So if you're kind of here and this sounds really familiar to you, like you feel okay during the day, but then like 3 p.m. comes around and you are like on struggle street, like how am I meant to get through the rest of the day? Looking at what you're eating at breakfast time and how can you make that a bit more balanced with protein, fat, and your carbohydrates. So that's a really great place to start. And thinking about like inflammatory foods as well, and how you can bring those down. So things like looking at the oils that you're cooking with, like vegetable oils is a great place to kind of remove vegetable oils from the home and put more nourishing, hormone loving oils in. So those, even just if like 2 top tips there, that would be those. And then when it comes to stress, like I've said earlier, like stress is huge for our hormone health. Like I have missed a whole period because of, so this is a really interesting story, and this fact in general I find amazing about our hormones. So I went traveling around Asia for a few months, and I arrived in India and it was like an overload to my senses. I was very stressed out. I arrived in Delhi and I didn't know where I was going, and I was just really, really stressed. Yeah. And then 3 months later, after I'd been in India and started to understand everything and I was loving life, 3 months later, I completely didn't have a period. And I was like, oh my, like, what has happened? Obviously, even if it's not possible for you to have been pregnant, you start going like, oh my God, am I pregnant? Like what's happening? Like what, like tracing your footsteps. Yeah. And then I started reading up on it, and basically what happens in our lives this month, the month before, and the month before that. So looking like 90 to 100 days previously, what was happening in that moment is going to have an effect on how I experience my cycle this month. Interesting. When I started thinking about it, I was like, what happened 3 months ago? Oh my gosh, that was the time that I arrived in Delhi, and I was so stressed that I completely missed an ovulation in that cycle, which then meant I didn't bleed 3 months later, because that is when the egg, so 90 to 100 days, that's when the egg for ovulation 3 months into the future is chosen. So that when I work with my clients, it's typically around a 3-month basis, because if you want to see improvements and rebalancing with your hormones, it can take up to 90 days for the hormones to kind of go through their full rebalancing. You will see improvements along the line, but if you were wanting to work on like a particular period problem, say like heavy bleeding or irregular bleeds, it would be at that 3-month mark that you would definitely start to see those big changes if you've been implementing lifestyle changes. So that is why stress is such a big one. So if you are, feel like you're under a bit of stress all the time, and there's so much going on in the world in general, just like living in this world right now is quite stressful. Really cultivate time for a few things during the day that you absolutely love, and really simple things. So for me, it's like enjoying my cup of coffee in the morning, and taking my dog for a walk with no phones, and really soaking up that moment. Because what happens there is when you do those things that you love, you are reducing your stress hormone cortisol. So there's this beautiful balancing act that goes on between oxytocin and the stress hormone cortisol. So once you're doing more things that you love, oxytocin increases. So like things like gardening, reading, having orgasms, cuddling with loved ones, cuddling with your pets, all increase oxytocin. That means that our stress hormone comes down. So I think sometimes with stress, people often think, oh, I'm going to have to like meditate for like 40 minutes a day, but actually just do more little things every day that bring you joy, and you'll be on such a great path to reducing stress. So that's the stress one. Movement, move your body daily, just 15-20 minutes of walking, just get moving. And if you are somebody that really enjoys different types of exercising, once you've brought in this kind of cyclical nature into your life, using that as your tool of, okay, this is when I'm going to go and do my really intense HIIT session, like around that ovulation time. And as I'm leading into my menstruation phase, I'm going to ease off. Maybe I'll go do some nice yin yoga. A nap is, a form of exercise when we're on our period. So using that again, because exercise is a stressor on the body. There's no other way around it. It's what we call a good stressor. But if you are running high on stress anyway, and you're using exercise, like I was addicted to CrossFit. So I used to use CrossFit as like my stress relief tool, not realizing that then I was just up to my eyeballs with stress, because that's not actually what the body needs to decompress. So kind of weaving that in as well. And then sleep, making sure that you're getting good quality sleep. So an hour before bedtime, thinking about winding down, minimizing, your exposure to your phone and your laptops and your TV, maybe creating a bit of a nighttime routine like you do with your morning. I love to use lavender and have those certain smells that my body knows, okay, it's winding down time. And then with environmental toxins, like this is a huge one. All of this can be very overwhelming. But just kind of having a look in the home. Okay, what are the products that I use really like frequently? And a big one that I start with my clients is, okay, do you have like any air fresheners at home? Those plug-in air fresheners or, spray air fresheners. I would kind of urge you to start phasing those out, because fragrance, the term fragrance, has a lot of hormone disrupting chemicals within them, and they're quite prolific. So that's kind of like my first tip, is just to kind of minimize those in the home, and you're going to see real great benefits if you started to put those in. And I do appreciate that that's kind of a lot to take in, and like I remember feeling so overwhelmed when I started to do this work myself. So I've like put together a little ebook as well that you can get that kind of has all of these foundations, how you can kind of start to weave them in. So it's kind of a little bit more manageable. And what I'd say is pick the area that you feel most, where you want to make the change. Don't pick something that you just really don't want to do that right now, because you won't do it. Pick the thing that feels like, oh yeah, I'm really interested in that, and I could definitely start to implement that. And then you build on those wins over and over a period of time.
That's so interesting that you said about scent as well, because how it's I think it's important scent because it can have a calming effect, but how if you walk into an office building or you walk to someone's car and it's that really fake kind of over processed smell that you can get a headache or you instantly feel a bit stressy or a bit on edge.
Yeah.
It's really important how for our cycles, it's really that we have certain scents that calm us or bring us peace and not agitation.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm a big fan of like essential oils. And if we, I'm not saying like you have to live a fragrance-free lifestyle because that would just be so bland. And if I love certain perfumes, and that was one of the hardest things for me to give up. But then eventually I was just like, okay, I'm just going to transition to using an essential oil, and then you get to experience a different way of creating beautiful, smells in your home. But like you said, that if you do suffer with headaches as well, I think fragrances in the home is a really great place to start, because those synthetic ones, they can really give us like respiratory things, headaches. It's not only going to benefit hormones, has this other amazing benefit as well.
Yeah. And for pain, because a lot of us experience pain during our periods, what would you suggest we can do naturally to ease the pain that we have?
Yeah. So again, these foundational elements will be really important, especially the nutrition piece.
Yeah.
Because pain is often a symptom of like inflammation in the body, and that's how it kind of manifests itself.
Okay. Yeah.
So, as well as those things I touched on earlier, making sure you're getting lots of like green cruciferous vegetables, things that help you detox. So think of estrogen as we want estrogen, but we don't want too much of it. Because when we have too much of it, that's when we get these problems. So think of lots of fiber, green leafy veggies, making sure that you're having a regular bowel movement daily, because that's going to flush out that excess estrogen, which is going to cause us some issues. So that's kind of like the foundational piece. But in terms of like when you are having the pain, I'm a big fan of a hot water bottle. Like you literally cannot beat a hot water bottle. There are some really great essential oils that you can use, like wintergreen is a really amazing pain relief. If you are in a country where CBD is available, you can get CBD roll-ons. You can, there is really great studies. And obviously, make sure you're getting it from a reputable company and it's organic, all that kind of stuff. But there's some really great studies about the anti-inflammatory properties of CBD.
Yeah.
Turmeric is another great one. So, if you're a big fan of like golden milk, that kind of all of those types of things, turmeric is amazing. Just put turmeric in everything. And those types of tools. And if the pain is something that you struggle with, definitely the nutrition piece and seeing how that would impact you over, 2 to 3 months. And there's nothing better than when I work with a client and they're like, I used to always have to take like paracetamol and ibuprofen. Now I'm like, I can feel that there's something there. And this is the thing as well. A little bit of pain, like is what they'd say like normal. Because if you think about it, our uterus is contracting, it's shedding a line inside.
Big deal.
So so if you're sat here going, I do kind of have a bit of discomfort, and then again it all comes down to our pain threshold as well, right? Some people can tolerate pain more than others. So you'll feel that something is happening in that lower abdomen area. If the pain is in the back, in the hips, some people even maybe have it in the legs, that's kind of when we'd say the pain isn't normal. So that's probably an indicator that there's, put some of those lifestyle factors into place, see how that has an impact over the months. And then if the pain really doesn't subside once you've started to make those lifestyle tweaks, that's definitely a time that maybe I would advise somebody to go and speak to their healthcare provider, because it could be a sign of something else, like endometriosis.
Yes. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And with endometriosis, you really, really have to advocate for yourself, because I've known a lot of clients that have gone to their healthcare provider and have been just palmed off, is what I would say, of, oh, it's just period pain, just get used to it. Like it's normal. And again, period pain isn't normal. It may be common, but it's not normal, and it shouldn't be like palmed off as normal.
Yeah.
So if you feel that you're not being listened to, get tenacious and keep going back. Like endometriosis can take, anything from like 7 to 12 years to be diagnosed. Like that just isn't good enough, and it's debilitating.
Yeah, completely.
That some women are going through with that.
Yeah.
So again, having your cycle and knowing your information makes you really powerful when you go to talk to a healthcare provider, because you could be there with all of your information. You're like, this is when it happens, and it's not normal. So yeah.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, I have a few friends that suffer with endometriosis, and watching them each month go through what they go through is heartbreaking. And two, I mean, I've got one friend that, luckily, she has been very persistent, and they're never going to be able to fix it, unfortunately, but at least being able to ease the pain to be able to function is great. And it is so important for us women to be able to stand up for ourselves, one, know our bodies, because there's nothing more debilitating when you go to the doctor and they don't listen to you. And if you know your body, like, listen, there is something wrong, and I want to get to the bottom of this. So let's do this together.
Yeah.
Wow, this is like such good information that you've shared today with us. I mean, it's just so important. I really, really, really hope, ladies, that you moving forward, getting to know yourself, that you follow Kirsty, because on her Instagram, she has a lot of really useful information, and she has her ebook, which is amazing. If you need some coaching and counseling, contact her. And it's really good that you're going to do group stuff in the future, because I think that's really great that you can have that support group as well from women, and feed off each other and ask questions. That's really nice. No?
Yeah.
To have that. And have you considered hosting any moon rituals or anything in your group? Will you implement that, or is that more just about will that be implemented?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to it. And I'm in the process now of working to get some guest speakers to come in and collaborate with that as well. And I'm a big fan of yoga, meditation, those kind of practices to help us kind of get connected, get out of our heads into our bodies. So that's definitely something that helps me personally. And I'd love to have a facilitator in there as well. And just with this work as well, like even if the listeners here, maybe the group program isn't right for them now, like before that, I'm hosting a 3-day kind of, like, I call it a boot camp. It's all going to be free. So if you are new to tracking, that's going to be a really great place for you to kind of really get into the tracking and start to have this, information about the fundamentals, the foundations to kind of get you on your way. So I'd encourage anybody that's just a little bit interested in what we've talked about to come on over and sign up there. But in terms of rituals, I am a big fan of, just using that cycle and create what you love to do, because we all love different things, don't we?
Completely.
I'm very excited about the group program. And like you've just said, bringing a group of women menstruators together who are collectively going through something, to feel supported, and to hear one another, and to share, their stories. And I think that it's really going to be transformational. I'm very, very excited to be facilitating it.
Absolutely. And from what I've read and what you said before, once you started doing the research for yourself, do you feel that once you figured this out and started tracking, you kind of grow into yourself, don't you? You become a stronger, more confident woman, which is all what we essentially want to achieve, right?
Yeah, I think just that whole idea of really not second guessing yourself, and not allowing anybody else to almost like I suppose there's that element of like not taking away your power, but not allowing anybody to kind of say, no, your experience isn't what you're saying that your experience
Yeah.
is. And you're like, absolutely not. It is my experience.
Yeah.
And again, I feel that with the tracking and knowing you're normal, that is your power to go, no, it might be normal for somebody else, but it's not normal for me. And there is something so empowering about that.
Oh, completely.
So yeah, it really, I think for me, just on a personal level, it really has helped me make so much sense of it. And like my partner, because I talk about this all the time, he's so in tune with it now as well.
Brilliant.
Like he has such a great understanding of it. So if I'm snappy, he isn't like, oh, you're on your period. He's like, okay, so you're like, he knows where I am, and he can kind of like give me a bit of a wide berth if I need it. He feeds me. He makes sure I'm not going to get hangry. Like, so it's kind of, it expands, because you will inevitably talk about this to everybody because it's so fascinating and empowering. And then it expands and more people then become aware of it. So I'm excited because there's definitely a movement. And I feel that the younger generation, I'm excited for your daughter, because I feel that, you know, social media has its downfalls, I know, but there are more and more empowering conversations around this happening. And from what I'm understanding is that, you know, girls are talking a little bit more openly around these kinds of things. So yeah, I'm very excited for the future.
I mean, absolutely. It's yes. And I think also as mothers of young daughters, being one, knowing ourselves and knowing how to have the conversation and being more open. Because for me personally, my daughter knows when I'm on my period. We've talked about it. She's very detailed because she asks questions, because I want her to be empowered by this as well. And when she's empowered and as women are empowered, and like a very, very important point, and I'm glad you brought that up, the men in our lives as well can understand and also be empowered by it, because they feel good too when they know how they can help you as well. Goes very hand in hand, and that communication can flow a bit better. And this is where relationships as well have problems during the time of the month, because someone's snappy and they don't tell you this or this. So it really can have a flow. Your flow can help the rest of your life have a good flow.
It's that word, isn't it? It's like flow. It makes so much sense.
It does,
such a flow, and exactly what you were saying, like with the people around us, and you know how important our language is around this topic. You know, I grew up where men and boys were like, oh, it's your time of the month, she's all moody, and it's like, that's not the kind of language we want to take with us with the next generation. It's like, okay, yeah, mummy's going through something, like let's, you know, she needs some time to herself, she needs some time to rest, let's give her that time to, you know, to come out of this with more energy, instead of again using it as like a tool to almost like keep us down, like so it's, let's use the empowering language around it, and that there are the 4 phases, the 4 seasons, but within each of those, we have our special superpowers. We have the things that we can do. So it doesn't, you know, we don't have to, everything doesn't have to stop, and we don't have to be really hard on ourselves. And I think, again, this all comes down to the way society has developed. It's developed around the 24-hour clock, which fits in perfectly with the male hormones.
But not with us.
Not with us. So we're trying to we're judging ourselves based on that version of society. So there's no wonder that for us, we can feel so frustrated, because at the moment, society doesn't allow us to, you know, work with our cyclical nature within the constructs of the current system. I'm really fortunate that there's companies that I work with that are more open to understanding that women may need some more time off, menstruators may need some more time off around that time. And there's definitely more of there's the shift that way, but I think we still have quite a long way to go.
We do. And what's your opinion on that? How, as a society, and in a world of capitalism, how do we bring up more awareness for more time for women, or more education within the workplace? What needs to be done? I know everything has to be a process, and it takes a while, but what can we do personally to help this process move a bit faster?
I think open conversations, so not being afraid. And I know this can be challenging, especially if your manager is like a male that maybe you don't have like a really good relationship with. It can be tricky to go to them and say, I'm actually taking this day off because I'm really low energy. I'm actually in a lot of pain. Like, I appreciate that can be a struggle, but the more and more we can have these open conversations, and especially if we are, lots of women and other menstruators within our companies have those conversations with them. So women in positions of power have those open conversations and be like, okay, well, there's actually times when we know that we can push this person harder.
Yeah.
So can we be a little bit more flexible with when we're going to schedule our meetings, do the presentations, expect her to be doing things?
Yeah.
And it's okay if she needs to finish early on that day. It's okay if she needs to start late. It's okay if she needs to take a longer lunch break.
Yeah.
Working from home. So I think it all starts with the open conversations with our employers, the people that we work with.
Yeah.
And my vision is that we have programs within companies. So lots of companies have well-being programs. So as part of well-being programs, there are not only conversations and education around menstruating years, but also really important, the years of peri-menopause and menopause.
Yes.
Because that is not talked or known about enough. And women really struggle in that phase. And I would say mentally, it can be very challenging. So I think it's almost as important as there's a place for the school education. There's also workplace education that needs to happen. And there is definitely there needs to be like a mentality shift as well, because often it's been men that are in position of powers, and they're like, well, women are just using this as an excuse so they can have like 1 or 2 days off. And it's that mentality that has to change. Like, we all have to be on this education together. And I'm a big advocate that it's within well-being programs in corporations that this that change can be made, and that the education can happen that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because then, just as a society, and again, that cycle will be an easier transition for women. It'll be easier in their workplace. And then also the workplaces, again, there's just that more of that flow. Then everyone will get their work done, but they'll understand that so-and-so, is struggling a little bit emotionally at that time. So it's like, okay, work from home today. It's fine. Not a big deal. I know you'll get it in. It's nothing on their worth ethic or their personality. It's just, listen, I'm having if you're menopause, I'm actually having a hot flash. I can't even breathe right now. I'm sweating. I can't go into that meeting. I feel miserable. Exactly. Yeah, that's really, really, really important. It's interesting with perimenopause, because there does need to be education, not just for women with periods, because they're like, all of a sudden, when you get into your 40s, this is going to happen to you. And most of us in our 40s don't even know what it is. We're like, wait a minute, we've heard about menopause, but what's perimenopause? I didn't even know this. Like, wow, okay, so another transition I'm going to go through to get into another transition. And how, as women, to be educated about this, we know how to handle ourselves, right? We know what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Where are all these empowering conversations, and why haven't they happened sooner? Is what it comes down to. And the whole conversation around perimenopause in particular, when you put those foundational pieces in to help your hormones when you're in your premenstrual years, that really is going to help the transition through perimenopause and menopause. So it's like, yeah, we do the work now, like with everything, we're laying the foundations now that are going to really help us through to, when we no longer even have periods, but it's all building up to try and make that transition as graceful as possible.
It's all a journey, isn't it? And I just love, this is what's so beautiful about knowing your cycle. It's also, everything's connected. Our mind, body, and spirit are all connected. And if we can connect our cycle with our spirituality, if you're a spiritual person, and our health, you just have that synergy, that easy, more of an easiness about yourself. And that's what's beautiful about life is, yes, it's a journey and we need to take time to lay that foundation, but how amazing it is and how life is super fun and exciting. Once you lay that foundation, you get to know a little bit more about yourself, which is great. Because a lot of times I think people feel overwhelmed with getting to know themselves. Like, no, it's supposed to be fun, it's hard work, but still you get to a point where you're like, ooh, what am I going to learn today?
Exactly. And I love that mindset. And often like the mindset I talk about with my clients is like, think of this as like an experiment. So anything that you're wanting to like try, it's not that if you don't do it or if it didn't work out that you've failed. It's that it's an experiment. It's all just information and feedback that we're getting. So then we can know, okay, we need to pivot, we need to change. No, that worked. We'll keep doing it. We'll build on it. And I just think you can just take that to life. Life is just one big experiment. You literally have no control over how it's going to go. You just have to suck it and see and be like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's smile and move on, instead of, I feel that we just beat ourselves up about everything. Like, oh, well, she could do it. Why can't I do it? And I'm like, well, she's a different person with different circumstances, different build, everything. When we're not built the same. And like, I love the saying of like, well, a lot of things around diet and exercise and weight loss and fat loss and all of that comes from studies on men. Women are so underrepresented in medical studies. So just remember that, say for instance, I have a lot of clients that like they started intermittent fasting when their husband did and he lost loads of weight and then they didn't. And I'm like, because you're not a small man. That's not how you're designed. You have different things going on that when you understand it, it makes sense. And like I get it, like we want our lives to be easier. So we don't want to be like, it's nice to be able to be doing stuff with other people. But just remember that, you have different things going on to like the men in your lives. Yeah. And the sooner that we can kind of accept that as well, the easier that is for everyone.
Wow. Oh, wow. I could talk to you all day long because this is so interesting for me. And so if you would like to know more about your hormones and how to get into rhythm, please contact her. She is so full of information. It's amazing. And book a one-on-one. Is there any last things that you would like to say before we end the podcast today?
No, just any questions that come up. Like if you're on Instagram, connect with me that way or drop me an email. I would just say, if you're interested in any of this kind of stuff and putting in some changes, get that ebook. It's so jam-packed. It's like years of my own experience and research and just help. That's all I want to do, is just help people put one foot in front of the other to try and kind of like beat the overwhelm that we feel when it comes to like putting these changes into place. And just do one thing today for your hormone health.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I will link everything below so you can find her super easily. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to bring her back on. We'll be talking more about hormone stuff in the future. So thank you very much, Kirsty, for being here today.
Thank you.